Welcome to today's story, a roller coaster of emotions, betrayal, and redemption that will leave you questioning everything about trust and relationships. Imagine living a picture-perfect life, only to have it shattered in an instant by betrayal. That's exactly what happened to Michael Wilcox, a devoted husband and father whose world crumbles when he uncovers his wife Claire's affair with a charming but dangerous entrepreneur named Ryan. This isn't just a story about infidelity. It's a high-stakes journey of manipulation, heartbreak, and the relentless pursuit of justice. As secrets unravel and tensions rise, one family will be pushed to their breaking point. Stay tuned for an emotional and thrilling tale that will keep you hooked until the very last moment. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to follow more incredible stories. Like this one, let's begin. It was the summer of 2017 and the quiet suburbs of Greenfield buzzed with the kind of unassuming charm you'd find on the cover of a postcard. Tree-lined streets, perfectly trimmed hedges, and the soft hum of cicadas created a picture-perfect backdrop for a community where nothing extraordinary ever seemed to happen. But beneath the surface, as it often is, secrets festered. At the center of this picturesque town was the Wilcox family. Michael, a devoted husband and father, and Claire, his vibrant and ambitious wife. The two had been married for 15 years, a union that started with a whirlwind romance in college and blossomed into a life of shared dreams and hard work. Their daughter Emma was a precocious 10-year-old, the kind of kid who painted rainbows on every surface she could find and believed her parents were the heroes of every bedtime story. Michael, or Mike as his friends called him, was the quintessential suburban dad. He worked as a project manager at a construction firm, a job he took pride in despite its mundanity. His days were a cycle of early mornings, long commutes, and late evenings spent hunched over blueprints. But he didn't mind. He was building a future for his family, one brick at a time. Claire, on the other hand, was the yin to his yang. Where Michael was steady and predictable, Claire was lively and impulsive. She had an infectious laugh, the kind that made people turn and smile even if they didn't know her. She ran a small but successful event planning business, spending her days juggling floral arrangements, seating charts, and the occasional bridezilla. Claire loved her work. It gave her an outlet for her creativity, a way to channel the energy that Michael sometimes found overwhelming. The Wilcox home was a cozy two-story house at the end of a cul-de-sac, the kind of place that screamed normal. But as any seasoned storyteller knows, normal is just another word for a tightly wound spring waiting to unravel. It all started on an ordinary Tuesday in June. Michael had just returned home from work, his tie loosened and his brow damp with the day's heat. Claire was in the kitchen, her phone propped against a stack of cookbooks as she followed a recipe for chicken piccata. Emma sat at the dining table, her head bent over a puzzle that seemed to have more pieces than the human brain was designed to handle. "Smells great," Michael said, leaning in to kiss Claire on the cheek. She smiled but didn't look up, her attention fixed on her phone. "Long day?" she asked absent-mindedly, her fingers deftly chopping parsley. Michael shrugged, dropping his briefcase by the door. "The usual Jones mixed up the permits again, so I spent half the day on damage control." Claire chuckled, her voice light and melodic. "Sounds like Jones." Dinner was as uneventful as the rest of the evening. They talked about Emma's upcoming piano recital, Michael's plans for a weekend barbecue, and Claire's latest client, a tech billionaire who wanted his engagement party to feature live peacocks. They were the conversations of a family firmly entrenched in the routine of life, comfortable, predictable, and utterly unremarkable. But later that night, as Michael lay in bed scrolling through his emails, he noticed something odd. Claire's phone buzzed on the nightstand with a frequency that didn't match her usual late-night texts from friends. She reached for it quickly, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the screen. "Everything okay?" Michael asked, his tone casual. "Yeah," Claire said too quickly. "Just work stuff." He nodded, not thinking much of it. Claire's job often bled into odd hours, especially with high-profile clients demanding immediate attention. But as the nights went on, Michael began to notice a pattern. The late-night texts, the hastily closed tabs on her laptop, the sudden need to step outside to take calls. It was subtle at first, the kind of thing you'd only catch if you were paying attention, and Michael, despite his exhaustion, had started paying attention. It wasn't that he didn't trust Claire, he did, or at least he wanted to, but there was a nagging feeling, a whisper in the back of his mind that he couldn't quite shake. And when you live in a world where everything is supposed to make sense, even the smallest inconsistency can feel like an earthquake. The tipping point came on a Saturday morning. Michael was in the garage, trying to coax the lawnmower into cooperating, when Claire announced she was heading out to meet a client. "Another weekend meeting?" he asked, his tone light but tinged with curiosity. Claire hesitated, just for a fraction of a second before smiling. "Yeah, it's a big job. I'll be back before lunch." Michael watched her drive away, his chest tight with an unease he couldn't name. He decided not to dwell on it, focusing instead on the stubborn lawnmower. But later, when he walked into the house and saw Claire's laptop sitting open on the kitchen counter, curiosity got the better of him. He wasn't proud of it. Snooping wasn't in his nature, but as he stared at the screen, the whisper in his mind grew louder. He opened the laptop, his fingers hovering over the keyboard as he debated what to do, and then, as if on autopilot, he clicked on her email. At first, everything seemed normal. Work correspondence, invoices, confirmations from vendors. But then he saw it, an email thread with no subject line, buried in the middle of her inbox. The sender was someone named Ryan L. Michael's heart sank as he clicked it open. The messages weren't explicit, not at first. They were casual, friendly, even professional. But as he scrolled further, the tone shifted. The language became more personal, the jokes more intimate, and then, at the bottom of the thread, a message that made his stomach drop. "Last night was amazing. I can't stop thinking about you." Michael stared at the screen, his mind reeling. He felt like he was standing on the edge of a cliff, the ground crumbling beneath him. He closed the laptop and sat down at the table, his hands trembling. This couldn't be happening. Not to them, not to Claire. But as the weight of the words settled in, Michael knew that his picture-perfect life was about to shatter. Michael sat in the quiet kitchen, his thoughts a chaotic storm of disbelief and anger. The email had been short, but packed with meaning, leaving no room for misinterpretation. His wife Claire, the woman he had loved for over a decade, was having an affair. For the rest of the day, Michael moved through the house like a ghost. He finished mowing the lawn, helped Emma with a puzzle, and even cleaned out the garage, tasks that required no thought, just action. All the while, his mind replayed the email and what it meant for his family. By the time Claire returned home, carrying a bag of groceries and flashing him her usual bright smile, Michael felt like he was watching a stranger. She kissed him on the cheek and asked about his day as if everything were normal. Michael played along, nodding and smiling in all the right places, but inside, he was unraveling. Later that night, as Claire slept beside him, Michael stared at the ceiling, his mind racing with questions. Who was Ryan L? How long had this been going on? And most importantly, what was he supposed to do now? The answers wouldn't come easily, but one thing was clear: he needed to know the truth. The following week, Michael became a man on a mission. He started small, casually asking Claire about her work and her clients, trying to catch any inconsistencies. But Claire was smooth, her answers practiced and confident. If she suspected anything, she didn't show it. Frustrated, Michael decided to dig deeper. He waited until Claire left for another client meeting and then searched the house for clues. Her laptop was clean. She must have deleted the emails. But her phone was a goldmine. He found more messages from Ryan L., each one more intimate than the last. Thinking about you. Can't wait to see you again. I wish we didn't have to sneak around like this. Michael's stomach churned as he scrolled through the texts, his worst fears confirmed. This wasn't a fleeting mistake. It was a full-blown affair, but something else caught his attention. Ryan L. wasn't just anyone. He was one of Claire's clients. A wealthy entrepreneur with a reputation for charm and arrogance. Michael recognized his name from the news, where Ryan was often pictured at exclusive events, surrounded by luxury and excess. Suddenly, the pieces started to fall into place. Claire's late-night texts, her weekend meetings, her sudden interest in high-end fashion, it all led back to Ryan Michael's anger turned into a slow-burning fury. This man wasn't just stealing his wife, he was dismantling his entire life. Michael knew he couldn't confront Claire, not yet. He needed proof, something undeniable that would expose the affair and force her to admit the truth. So he turned to someone he never thought he'd need, his best friend, Nate. Nate had been Michael's college roommate and remained his closest confidant. He was a private investigator by trade, a career choice that always struck Michael as oddly fitting for a man who could charm the truth out of anyone. When Michael explained the situation, Nate didn't hesitate. "Leave it to me," Nate said, his tone calm but firm. "I'll get you the proof you need." The next few weeks were a blur of surveillance and secrecy. Nate followed Claire to her meetings, snapping photos of her with Ryan at upscale restaurants and hotels. He captured text messages, phone calls, even surveillance footage of them entering a boutique hotel together. When Nate handed over the evidence, Michael felt a mix of vindication and heartbreak. It was all there, in black and white, proof of Claire's betrayal. But what hurt the most were the candid moments, the stolen glances and whispered laughter that showed how deeply she was involved with Ryan. As the evidence piled up, Michael began to notice changes in Claire. She was more distant, more secretive, and more defensive when he asked about her day. It was as if she could sense his growing suspicion, but couldn't bring herself to come clean. One evening, as they sat on the couch watching a movie, Michael decided to test the waters. "Hey, remember when we used to plan surprise getaways?" he asked, his tone light. "We should do that again, just the two of us." Claire hesitated, her smile faltering. "That sounds nice," she said, but her eyes told a different story. She was already thinking of an excuse, a way out. Michael nodded, forcing a smile. "Let's make it happen," he said, even though he knew it never would. If you've been captivated by this story so far, don't forget to like this video, share it with friends, and subscribe to the channel. We post gripping stories like this every week, and you won't want to miss what happens next. The turning point came on a crisp autumn evening. Michael had been holding on to the evidence for weeks, unsure of how or when to confront Claire. But when he found another message from Ryan on her phone, this one discussing plans for a romantic weekend getaway, something inside him snapped. He waited until Emma was asleep and Claire was in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner. As she hummed softly to herself, Michael walked in, holding the folder of evidence Nate had compiled. "We need to talk," he said, his voice steady but cold. Claire turned, her smile fading when she saw the folder in his hands. "What's this?" she asked, her tone cautious. "Open it," Michael said, setting it on the table. Claire hesitated, her eyes darting between the folder and Michael. Slowly, she reached for it, her hands trembling as she flipped through the photos and messages. Her face turned pale. "Michael, I can explain," she began, but he cut her off. "Don't," he said sharply. "Don't insult me by pretending this isn't exactly what it looks like." Claire's eyes filled with tears, But Michael didn't soften. "How long?" he demanded. "How long has this been going on?" Claire looked away, her voice barely above a whisper. 6 months. Michael's chest tightened, the confirmation hitting him like a punch to the gut. He took a deep breath, trying to keep his composure. "Why?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Why would you do this to us, to Emma?" Claire wiped her eyes, her words tumbling out in a rush. "I didn't mean for it to happen, Ryan made me feel alive again, like I was someone special." Michael stared at her, his anger mixing with a deep, aching sadness. "I thought I made you feel special," he said quietly. "You did," Claire said, her voice breaking. "You do, but somewhere along the way, I lost myself, and I didn't know how to tell you." Michael shook his head, his mind racing with everything he wanted to say, but instead, he stood up and walked out of the room, leaving Claire alone with the evidence of her betrayal. Michael didn't sleep that night. After walking out on Claire, he spent hours sitting in his car, staring at the darkness beyond the driveway. The air was thick with tension, his mind a storm of emotions he couldn't contain. Anger, sadness, betrayal. They swirled together, leaving him hollow. When dawn finally broke, Michael returned to the house, determined to take action. This wasn't just about Claire's affair anymore. It was about the life they had built together, a life now teetering on the edge of collapse. If there was any hope of salvaging it, he needed to confront the situation head-on. The day began with an unexpected development. While Michael was packing Emma's lunch, Claire approached him. Her eyes were red from crying, and her expression was a mixture of guilt and resolve. "Michael, I want to talk," she said softly. Michael set the knife down, his shoulders stiffening. "I'm listening." Claire hesitated, her hands wringing nervously. "I'm sorry for what I did. I never wanted to hurt you or Emma. I don't know how I let it get this far." Michael's jaw tightened. "You didn't let it get this far, Claire. You chose this." She flinched at his words but nodded. "I know, and I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." Michael stared at her, his eyes searching for any sign of sincerity. "If you're serious about fixing this, you need to end it with Ryan completely." "I already have," Claire said quickly. "I blocked his number, deleted his messages. He's out of my life." Michael's lips pressed into a thin line. "That's a start, but it doesn't erase what you've done." "I know," Claire whispered. "But I want to try for us, for Emma." Michael's heart ached as he looked at her. He wanted to believe her, to believe that they could find a way back to the life they once had. But the wounds were still fresh, and the trust they had built over 15 years felt irreparably broken. As the days turned into weeks, Michael and Claire tried to piece their lives back together. They attended couples counseling, worked on communication, and spent more time as a family. But the shadow of the affair loomed over everything, a constant reminder of the betrayal that had shaken their foundation. Meanwhile, Ryan L. refused to fade quietly into the background. He began sending Claire emails from new accounts, pleading with her to reconsider. At first, she ignored them, but when he showed up at her office unannounced, she realized he wasn't going to let go without a fight. Michael found out about Ryan's persistence when Claire admitted it during a counseling session. His anger reignited, but this time, it wasn't just directed at Claire. Ryan had inserted himself into their lives and refused to leave, and Michael wasn't about to let him destroy what little progress they had made. One evening, Michael decided to confront Ryan directly. He found the entrepreneur's contact information online and arranged to meet him at a nearby cafe. Michael arrived early, his stomach in knots as he rehearsed what he wanted to say. When Ryan finally walked in, dressed in a tailored suit and exuding confidence, Michael felt his anger boil over. "Michael Wilcox," Ryan said, extending a hand. "I assume you're here to talk about Claire." Michael ignored the gesture and motioned for Ryan to sit. "This ends now," he said, his voice low but firm. "You've done enough damage to my family." Ryan smirked, leaning back in his chair. "Look, I get it. You're upset, but Claire came to me, not the other way around." Michael's fists clenched under the table. "You don't get to play the victim here. She's trying to fix things, and you're making it impossible." Ryan shrugged, his smug demeanor infuriating. "Maybe she's not as committed to fixing things as you think." The words hit Michael like a punch to the gut, but he refused to let Ryan see how much they affected him. "Stay away from my wife," he said, his tone icy, "or I'll make sure you regret it." Ryan's smirk faltered, but he quickly recovered. "I think we're done here," he said, standing and adjusting his suit. "Good luck, Michael. You'll need it." The confrontation with Ryan only deepened Michael's resolve to protect his family, but things took a darker turn when Claire received an anonymous package at her office. Inside was a USB drive containing photos of her and Ryan together, along with a note that read, "Does your husband know the whole truth?" Claire was shaken, and when she showed Michael the package, he felt his anger reach a boiling point. It was clear that Ryan wasn't just refusing to let go, he was actively trying to sabotage their efforts to rebuild. Michael decided to take matters into his own hands. He reached out to Nate, who agreed to investigate Ryan's activities. What they uncovered was a web of deceit that went far beyond Claire's affair. Ryan had a history of manipulating women, using his wealth and charm to lure them in before discarding them when things got complicated. But this time, Ryan had underestimated his opponent. Michael wasn't just fighting for his marriage, he was fighting for his family's future. If you're still with us, you're not going to want to miss what happens next. Make sure to like this video, share it with someone who loves a good story, and subscribe to the channel so you're the first to know when we post new content. One night, as Michael pored over the evidence Nate had gathered, he realized he had everything he needed to expose Ryan for who he really was. He wasn't just a man having an affair, he was a predator, and it was time to bring him down. Michael and Nate devised a plan to confront Ryan in a way that would leave no room for manipulation or denial. They set up a meeting at a charity gala Ryan was attending, using Claire's connection to gain access. The gala was a glittering affair, with chandeliers casting a warm glow over the room and a string quartet playing softly in the background. Michael felt out of place in his borrowed tuxedo, but his resolve kept him steady. When Ryan spotted Michael across the room, his expression shifted from surprise to annoyance. But before he could slip away, Michael approached him. "Ryan," Michael said, his voice carrying just enough volume to draw attention. "We need to talk." Ryan glanced around, clearly uncomfortable with the sudden scrutiny. "This isn't the time or place," he said through gritted teeth. "Oh, I think it is," Michael replied, pulling out his phone and playing a recording of one of Ryan's incriminating conversations with Claire. The room fell silent as the recording echoed through the air, and Ryan's confident facade crumbled. The fallout was immediate and devastating for Ryan. His reputation was shattered, his business connections severed, and his carefully constructed image as a philanthropist destroyed. As he left the gala in disgrace, Michael felt a sense of closure he hadn't thought possible. Back at home, Michael and Claire faced the daunting task of rebuilding their relationship. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't always pretty, but they were determined to make it work, for Emma's sake and for the love they still felt beneath the pain. As the story reached its peak, the Wilcox family began to find a new kind of balance. They weren't the same people they had been before the affair, but maybe that was okay. Sometimes, the only way to grow is to face the things that threaten to break you. Michael stood on the porch, staring out into the night. The confrontation at the gala had been a victory, but it didn't feel like one exposing Ryan had been satisfying in the moment. But now the reality of his fractured marriage loomed larger than ever. The truth was, his problems didn't end with Ryan. Claire joined him, her footsteps hesitant. She wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, her expression a mix of exhaustion and hope. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" Michael asked, his voice heavy. "For standing up for us," she replied. "For not giving up on me, even when I gave you every reason to." Michael nodded but didn't say anything. He wasn't sure what to say. His heart was still raw, his trust still fragile. Claire seemed to sense his hesitation and took a step closer. "I know it's going to take time," she said, "but I'm willing to fight for us, Michael. I just need to know if you are too." Michael turned to face her, his eyes searching hers. The sincerity in her voice was undeniable, but so was the weight of everything they had been through. "I want to try," he said finally. "But it's not going to be easy." Claire nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "I don't expect it to be. I just want a chance to make things right." As the weeks passed, Michael and Claire worked tirelessly to rebuild their relationship. They attended therapy sessions, set new boundaries, and focused on open communication. It was a slow process, filled with setbacks and breakthroughs, but there was a sense of progress that hadn't been there before. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, Michael finally asked the question that had been weighing on him since the beginning. "Why him?" he asked, his voice quiet but steady. Claire looked down at her hands, her expression pained. "I don't know," she admitted. "At first, it was just attention. He made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in a long time, and then it spiraled into something I couldn't control." Michael nodded, his chest tightening. "You could have talked to me, Claire. We could have worked through it together." "I know," Claire said, her voice breaking. "But I was scared. I thought if I told you how I was feeling, you'd think I was ungrateful or selfish." Michael took her hand, his grip firm but gentle. "We've both made mistakes," he said. "But if we're going to move forward, we need to stop being afraid to be honest with each other." Claire nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'll do better, Michael. I promise." Meanwhile, Ryan's downfall continued to ripple through the community. The evidence Michael and Nate had gathered made its way to the press, exposing Ryan's pattern of manipulation and deceit. His business partners distanced themselves, his clients vanished, and his public image crumbled. Michael couldn't help but feel a sense of justice as he watched Ryan's empire collapse, but he also knew that revenge wasn't a solution. It didn't fix the cracks in his marriage or erase the pain of betrayal. It was a step, but it wasn't the end. One night, as Michael tucked Emma into bed, she looked up at him with wide, innocent eyes. "Daddy, are you and Mommy okay?" she asked. Michael's heart ached at the question. "Why do you ask, sweetheart?" Emma shrugged, her expression thoughtful. "You just seem different, like you're sad." Michael sat down beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Sometimes grown-ups go through hard times," he said gently, "but we're trying our best to work through it, and no matter what, we both love you very much." Emma nodded, her small hand reaching for his. "I love you too, Daddy." As Michael kissed her forehead and turned off the light, he felt a renewed sense of determination. He couldn't change the past, but he could fight for his family's future, for Emma's sake and for his own. If you're as invested in this story as I am, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. We've got more twists and turns coming your way, and you won't want to miss what happens next. The next major turning point came during a family dinner. It had been weeks since the gala, and Michael and Claire were beginning to find a new rhythm. But just as they started to feel a sense of normalcy, a knock at the door shattered the calm. Michael opened the door to find a courier holding an envelope. Inside was a legal document. Ryan was suing Claire for defamation, claiming the allegations against him had caused irreparable harm to his career and reputation. Claire's hands shook as she read the document. "What does this mean?" she asked, her voice trembling. "It means he's desperate," Michael said, his jaw tightening. "He's trying to shift the blame onto you to salvage what's left of his reputation." The lawsuit was a new kind of challenge, one that tested Michael and Claire's resolve. But instead of dividing them, it brought them closer. They strategized together, consulted with lawyers, and prepared to fight back. For the first time in months, they felt like a team. The courtroom battle was intense, filled with heated arguments and shocking revelations. Ryan's lawyers tried to paint Claire as a manipulative opportunist, while Michael and their legal team focused on exposing Ryan's history of predatory behavior. The turning point came when Nate testified, presenting undeniable evidence of Ryan's misconduct. Emails, text messages, and recorded conversations painted a damning picture, leaving the jury with little doubt about Ryan's true nature. In the end, the court ruled in Claire's favor, dismissing the defamation claims and ordering Ryan to pay damages for his malicious actions. It was a victory, but more importantly, it was a turning point for Michael and Claire. They had faced the storm together and come out stronger on the other side. As the story reached its climax, Michael and Claire found themselves standing on the porch once again, watching the sunset. The pain of the past months hadn't disappeared, but it no longer defined them. "We've come a long way," Claire said, her voice filled with gratitude. Michael nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "Yeah, we have." And for the first time in a long time, they felt like a family again. The courtroom victory felt like a turning point for Michael and Claire, but the battle with Ryan wasn't over. Though his public reputation was in tatters and his defamation case dismissed, Ryan was far from finished. His next move was more personal, a desperate attempt to claw back control in a game he was rapidly losing. It started with anonymous messages. Michael began receiving texts from unknown numbers, each one dripping with veiled threats and insinuations. The messages hinted at more skeletons in Claire's closet, vague allusions that made Michael's heart pound despite his efforts to dismiss them. "Just ignore them," Claire said one evening, her voice steady but her hands trembling as she held his phone. "He's trying to get under your skin." Michael nodded, but the unease lingered. It wasn't just the texts. It was the feeling that Ryan was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for his next opportunity to strike. Things escalated during a weekend trip Michael and Claire had planned as a step toward healing. They had rented a cabin in the mountains, hoping the peaceful surroundings would give them a chance to reconnect. Emma was staying with Claire's parents, and for the first time in months, Michael and Claire were alone together. The first day passed quietly, filled with long walks and quiet conversations. But that night, as they sat by the fireplace sipping wine, Claire's phone buzzed on the coffee table. She glanced at the screen, her face going pale. "What is it?" Michael asked, already dreading the answer. Claire hesitated before handing him the phone. It was another message, this time with a photo attached. The image showed Michael and Claire walking hand in hand earlier that day, their faces clear against the backdrop of the forest. Michael's chest tightened as he stared at the screen. "How is this possible? Who could have taken this?" Claire shook her head, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's him. It has to be." The realization that Ryan was actively stalking them shattered the fragile sense of peace they had been building. Michael called Nate immediately, explaining the situation in hurried whispers. Within hours, Nate had arranged for a private security team to sweep the area around the cabin and install surveillance equipment. The next morning, Michael and Claire found a note taped to the cabin door. It was short and chilling. "You can't hide from the truth." Claire broke down as Michael read the note aloud. "I can't do this anymore," she sobbed. "I can't keep living like this, always looking over my shoulder." Michael pulled her into his arms, his own fear buried beneath a growing determination. "We'll get through this," he said, his voice firm. "I won't let him win." As the days passed, the tension between Michael and Claire reached its breaking point. The constant fear and uncertainty had left them both on edge, and every conversation felt like a powder keg waiting to explode. One evening, after another tense discussion about whether to involve the police, Michael finally snapped. "Why didn't you see this coming?" he demanded, his voice sharper than he intended. Claire recoiled, her eyes wide with hurt. "You think I wanted this? That I knew he was capable of this?" Michael ran a hand through his hair, his anger fading as quickly as it had flared. "I don't know what I think anymore," he admitted. "I just want it to stop." Claire's expression softened, and she took a tentative step toward him. "So do I," she said quietly. "But we can't let him tear us apart, Michael. That's what he wants." Michael nodded, his anger giving way to a deep, aching sadness. "You're right," he said, pulling her into a hug. "We have to stick together." The next turning point came when Nate made a breakthrough. Using the surveillance footage from the cabin, he identified a car parked nearby that matched Ryan's vehicle. Armed with this evidence, Michael and Nate went to the police, filing a formal complaint and requesting a restraining order. But Ryan wasn't easily deterred. As the legal process played out, he escalated his harassment, targeting not just Michael and Claire but also their friends and family. Emma's school received an anonymous tip accusing Michael of neglect, prompting an investigation that left both parents reeling. "That's it," Michael said one evening, his voice shaking with rage. "I'm not waiting for the police to handle this. We're taking him down." If you've made it this far, you know the stakes are higher than ever. Don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. The climax is just around the corner, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. The final showdown came when Nate uncovered a critical piece of information. Ryan had been using a private network to coordinate his harassment campaign. With this evidence, Michael and Nate were able to file a lawsuit accusing Ryan of defamation, stalking, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The case went to court, and the tension in the courtroom was palpable. Ryan's lawyers tried to discredit Michael and Claire, painting them as vengeful and unstable. But Nate's meticulous investigation left little room for doubt. Emails, phone records, and surveillance footage painted a damning picture of Ryan's actions. As the verdict was read, Claire clutched Michael's hand, her nails digging into his skin. "We find the defendant guilty," the judge announced, her voice clear and unwavering. "The court orders the defendant to cease all contact with the plaintiffs and pay restitution for damages incurred." Michael and Claire exhaled simultaneously, the weight of months of fear and tension lifting in an instant. They had won, not just in court, but in reclaiming their lives from Ryan's grasp. As the dust settled, Michael and Claire began the slow process of rebuilding. They knew the scars of the past months would take time to heal, but for the first time, they felt like they could breathe again. Standing together on the porch, watching the sun set over their quiet neighborhood, Michael took Claire's hand. "We made it," he said, his voice filled with quiet relief. Claire nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "We did." And for the first time in what felt like forever, they believed it. The courtroom victory against Ryan brought a brief sense of relief, but the damage he had inflicted lingered like a bruise that refused to heal. The Wilcox family had won a battle, but the war, the emotional aftermath, the trust that had been shattered, was still far from over. Michael could feel the tension in every corner of their home. Claire was quieter than usual, her laughter subdued, her energy drained. Emma, though shielded from much of the turmoil, had picked up on the unease, her usual chatter replaced with tentative questions about whether everything was okay now. Michael hated the uncertainty. He hated that, even in victory, The shadow of what had happened still hung over them, and most of all, he hated that he didn't know how to fix it. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, Claire broke the silence that had grown between them. "I feel like I've lost who I am," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Michael turned to her, his heart aching at the vulnerability in her expression. "What do you mean?" Claire shrugged, looking down at her hands. "I've spent so much time trying to make up for what I did, trying to be the person you and Emma need me to be, that I don't even know who I am anymore. I don't know if I ever did." Michael reached for her hand, his grip firm but gentle. "You're Claire," he said. "You're my wife Emma's mom, the woman who built a business from nothing, who makes me laugh even when I don't feel like it. You're not perfect, but neither am I, and that's okay." Claire's eyes filled with tears, and she nodded. "I just want to feel like myself again." Michael pulled her into a hug, holding her tightly. "We'll figure it out," he said. "Together." Meanwhile, Nate continued digging into Ryan's activities, even after the court case was resolved. Something about the way Ryan had orchestrated his harassment campaign didn't sit right with him. He was meticulous, almost too meticulous, and Nate suspected there was more to the story than they had uncovered. His instincts proved correct. Late one night, Nate called Michael with an update. "You're not going to believe this," Nate said, his voice tinged with urgency. "Ryan wasn't working alone." Michael's stomach dropped. "What are you talking about?" "There's someone else," Nate explained. "A business associate, someone who's been helping him cover his tracks and keep his finances hidden. I'm still piecing it together, but this isn't over, Michael. Not by a long shot." Michael exhaled, running a hand through his hair. He had thought they were finally free of Ryan's influence, but now it seemed the rabbit hole went even deeper. The revelation about Ryan's accomplice reignited the tension that Michael and Claire had been working so hard to dispel. For weeks, their lives had revolved around lawyers, investigators, and courtrooms, and now they were being dragged back into the chaos they so desperately wanted to leave behind. Michael struggled to keep his anger in check. He wanted to confront Ryan, to force him to answer for everything he had done, but he knew that wasn't the answer. They had to be smarter than that. Claire, for her part, threw herself into work. She spent long hours at her office, planning events and meeting clients, trying to regain a sense of normalcy, but Michael could see the strain in her eyes, the way her shoulders tensed every time her phone buzzed with a new notification. One night, as they lay in bed, Michael turned to her. "We'll get through this," he said, his voice steady. "No matter what happens, we'll get through it." Claire nodded, but her eyes were filled with doubt. "I want to believe that," she said. "I really do. If you're still watching, I can't thank you enough for sticking with us through this roller coaster of a story. Don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who loves a good drama, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapter." The next turning point came when Nate finally uncovered the identity of Ryan's accomplice, a man named Victor Hale, a disgraced financial advisor who had been implicated in several high-profile embezzlement cases. It turned out Victor had been laundering money for Ryan, using shell companies to hide his assets and fund his harassment campaign. Michael and Nate brought the evidence to the authorities, who launched an investigation into Victor's activities. But the news didn't stay quiet for long. Within days, the story broke, and Ryan's name was once again splashed across headlines. This time, however, the fallout was even more devastating. Ryan's remaining business connections severed ties with him, his assets were frozen, and he faced new charges of fraud and conspiracy. Victor, caught in the crossfire, was arrested and agreed to cooperate with investigators in exchange for a reduced sentence. For Michael and Claire, the news was bittersweet. They were relieved to see Ryan and his accomplice finally face justice, but the scars they had left behind couldn't be erased overnight. In the aftermath of Ryan's downfall, Michael and Claire decided to take a much-needed step back from the chaos. They planned a weekend getaway, this time to a quiet lakeside cabin where they could focus on healing and reconnecting as a family. The trip wasn't perfect. There were moments of awkwardness, of conversations that felt forced and emotions that ran high. But there were also moments of laughter, of shared memories that reminded them why they had fought so hard to stay together. One evening, as they sat by the water watching the sunset, Claire turned to Michael. "I know we still have a long way to go," she said, "but I'm glad we're here together." Michael smiled, his hand finding hers. "Me too," he said, "one step at a time." As the story reached its final act, Michael and Claire began to rebuild not just their relationship, but their sense of self. They realized that healing wasn't about erasing the past. It was about learning from it, about finding strength in their vulnerability and forging a new path forward. For the first time in a long time, they felt like they could see the light at the end of the tunnel, and this time they were walking toward it together. As Michael and Claire returned from their lakeside getaway, there was a renewed sense of hope between them. The quiet moments they'd shared by the water felt like a much-needed reset, a reminder of the love that still tethered them together despite everything they had endured. But life, as they both knew too well by now, had a way of testing even the strongest resolve. The day after their return, Michael received a call from Nate that stopped him in his tracks. "Ryan's on the move," Nate said, his voice tense. "He's trying to skip town." Michael's grip on the phone tightened. "What do you mean, skip town?" "Victor's cooperation has him cornered. He's liquidating whatever assets he can and planning to flee. If he gets away, he might dodge the consequences entirely." Michael felt a rush of anger surge through him. After everything Ryan had done, the torment, the manipulation, the endless games, he wasn't about to let the man escape justice. Michael and Nate spent the next few hours working frantically, gathering evidence and contacting law enforcement. They provided the authorities with Ryan's movements, his recent transactions, and the locations of his known safe houses. The plan was clear. They would intercept him before he could disappear. But as the pieces fell into place, Michael couldn't shake the unease growing in his chest. Confronting Ryan wasn't just about closure anymore. It was about making a statement, proving that no matter how far Ryan ran, he couldn't outrun the consequences of his actions. The showdown came late that evening at a private airstrip just outside the city. Ryan had chartered a small plane, his last-ditch effort to escape the fallout of his crimes. As Michael and Nate arrived with the authorities in tow, the tension in the air was almost palpable. Ryan was standing by the plane, his expensive suit rumpled, his usual smirk replaced with a mask of desperation. When he saw Michael approaching, his eyes narrowed, and he took a step back. "This is over, Ryan," Michael said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. "You're not getting away." Ryan sneered, his confidence flickering back for a brief moment. "You really think you've won, don't you? That ruining me will fix your pathetic little life?" Michael's jaw tightened, but he didn't rise to the bait. "This isn't about me," he said. "It's about accountability, something you've avoided your entire life." The authorities moved in, placing Ryan in handcuffs as he continued to hurl insults and threats. But Michael didn't flinch. For the first time, he felt an overwhelming sense of peace. The man who had tried to destroy his family was finally facing the justice he deserved. As Ryan was led away, Michael turned to Nate, his expression unreadable. "It's done," he said quietly. Nate nodded. "Yeah, it is." But as they drove back into the city, Michael couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. Relief, yes, but also exhaustion, sadness, and the lingering question of what came next. Ryan was gone, but the scars he had left behind remained. Back at home, Claire was waiting for Michael with a look of quiet anticipation. When he walked through the door, She rushed to his side, her hands trembling as she cupped his face. "Is it over?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Michael nodded, his eyes meeting hers. "It's over." Claire let out a shaky breath, pulling him into a tight embrace. They stood there for a long moment, holding on to each other as if the world around them had finally stopped spinning. If you're still here, thank you for sticking with this story. Don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who loves a good comeback, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the final chapter of this journey. The days that followed were a blur of reflection and recovery. For the first time in months, Michael and Claire felt like they could breathe again. The constant tension, the fear of what Ryan might do next, had finally lifted. But the process of rebuilding wasn't linear. There were still moments of doubt, of pain, of questioning whether they could truly move past everything that had happened. Michael found himself waking up in the middle of the night, his mind racing with thoughts of what could have been, of the choices they had both made. One morning, as they sat together on the back porch with their coffee, Claire broke the silence. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice hesitant. "Maybe we should start fresh, leave this house, this town, go somewhere new." Michael looked at her, surprised. "You think running away is the answer?" Claire shook her head. "It's not about running away. It's about letting go. This place, it's full of memories, good and bad. Maybe we need a clean slate." Michael considered her words, his gaze drifting to the yard where Emma was playing with their dog. He understood where Claire was coming from, but the idea of leaving everything behind felt overwhelming. "I don't know," he admitted. "This is home. It's where Emma feels safe." "Maybe," Claire said, "but maybe it's also where we're stuck." The conversation planted a seed in Michael's mind. Over the next few weeks, he found himself reevaluating what home meant to him. Was it the physical place, the familiar walls and streets, or was it the people, the love and connection that made those walls feel like more than just a structure? As they continued to heal, Michael and Claire began to explore the possibility of starting over. They looked at new neighborhoods, new opportunities, new ways to rebuild their life together. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was one they approached as a team, something they hadn't done in far too long. The pivotal moment came on a crisp fall evening. Michael and Claire were sitting at the dining table, surrounded by paperwork and brochures for potential new homes. Emma joined them, her eyes wide with curiosity. "What are you guys doing?" she asked, climbing onto Michael's lap. "We're thinking about moving," Michael said gently, "starting fresh somewhere new." Emma frowned, her little brow furrowing. "Why I like it here." Michael exchanged a glance with Claire before turning back to Emma. "Sometimes change can be a good thing," he said. "It can help us grow and find new adventures." Emma considered his words, her expression softening. "Will there be a new room for me?" Michael smiled, kissing her forehead. "Of course, the best room." As they packed up their home and prepared for the move, Michael and Claire felt a renewed sense of purpose. It wasn't just about leaving the past behind. It was about building a future they could be proud of together. And as they drove away from the house that had seen their highest highs and lowest lows, they felt something they hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Michael's family's decision to move was met with a mix of relief and apprehension. Packing up their home wasn't just a logistical challenge, it was an emotional one. Every box they filled seemed to hold memories: birthday parties, family movie nights, even the arguments and tears. The walls that had witnessed their lives now stood bare, silent observers to their next chapter. Emma, ever the curious and imaginative child, took to the change better than Michael and Claire had expected. "Do I get to pick the paint for my new room?" she asked one afternoon, holding up swatches of vibrant colors. "Absolutely," Claire said with a smile. It's your space to make your own. Michael watched them, his heart swelling with a bittersweet mix of love and sadness. He was grateful for Emma's resilience and Claire's determination, but he couldn't shake the weight of everything they were leaving behind. Would a new house, a new town, really be enough to mend what had been broken? The days leading up to the move passed in a whirlwind of activity. Michael and Claire worked tirelessly to finalize paperwork, coordinate logistics, and say their goodbyes to friends and neighbors. Despite the busyness, an underlying tension lingered. The move was a leap of faith, and both Michael and Claire knew it would take more than a fresh start to truly heal. On their last night in the house, the family gathered in the living room, sitting on the floor amid a sea of packed boxes. Michael suggested they share their favorite memories from their time there. "I like the treehouse," Emma said immediately, her eyes lighting up. "And when Daddy made us pancakes every Saturday morning." Claire smiled, her gaze softening as she looked at Michael. "I think my favorite memory was when we brought Emma home from the hospital. She cried all night, and we were so tired, but we just kept looking at her, couldn't believe she was ours." Michael chuckled, nodding. "I remember that. I think we went through 3 pots of coffee." As the evening went on, the memories flowed and the laughter came more easily. For a few hours, it felt like they were leaving not out of necessity, but with hope for what lay ahead. If you're as invested in this story as we are, make sure to like this video, share it with friends, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional journeys like this one. The final chapter is coming, and you won't want to miss it. The move to their new home brought a mix of excitement and challenges. The house was smaller than their old one, but it felt cozy, welcoming, a blank canvas for their new beginning. Emma loved her new room, decorating it with fairy lights and drawings of her favorite animals. Claire threw herself into the process of making the house a home, unpacking boxes with a focus that bordered on obsessive. Michael, however, struggled to feel at ease while the physical move had gone smoothly. The emotional weight of their past lingered. He found himself waking up in the middle of the night, plagued by thoughts of Ryan's actions and the scars they had left behind. One night, as Michael stood in the kitchen staring at a half-empty cup of coffee, Claire joined him. She placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch grounding him. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked gently. Michael shook his head. "Just thinking." Claire leaned against the counter, her gaze searching his. "Do you think we made the right choice moving here?" Michael sighed, his shoulders slumping. "I don't know I want to believe we did, but it still feels like we're running away." Claire nodded, her expression pensive. "Maybe we are, but maybe that's okay. Maybe it's not about running away. It's about giving ourselves permission to start over." Michael looked at her, his heart aching at the vulnerability in her voice. He reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together." Claire smiled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Together. As the weeks turned into months, the Wilcox family began to find a new rhythm. Claire's event planning business started to pick up in their new town, and Emma thrived at her new school. Quickly making friends and diving into activities, Michael took on a new job as a project manager for a local construction company, finding solace in the steady routine. But healing wasn't linear. There were moments of tension, of old wounds reopening. Michael and Claire had their share of arguments, their share of doubts. But for every setback, there was also progress, a small victory, a shared laugh, a reminder of the love that still connected them. The climactic moment came during a family outing to a nearby park. It was a crisp autumn day, the air filled with the scent of fallen leaves and the sound of children's laughter. Emma had insisted they go, eager to show her parents the new playground she had discovered. As Emma raced off to climb the jungle gym, Michael and Claire sat on a bench, watching her with a mixture of pride and wistfulness. "She's growing up so fast," Claire said, her voice tinged with melancholy. Michael nodded, his gaze never leaving Emma. "She's amazing, stronger than we give her credit for." Claire turned to Michael, her expression serious. "You know, I don't think we would have made it through all this if it weren't for her. She's the reason I kept fighting." Michael met her gaze, his chest tightening. "Me too." For a moment they sat in silence, the weight of their journey settling between them. Then Claire reached for Michael's hand, her grip firm. "I know we still have a long way to go," she said, "but I'm proud of us for not giving up." Michael squeezed her hand, a small smile playing on his lips. "Me too." As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a warm golden glow over the park, Michael felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: peace. The scars of their past would never fully fade, but for the first time they didn't feel like chains holding him back. They felt like lessons, reminders of how far they had come. And as Emma ran back to them, her face lit up with joy, Michael knew they were exactly where they were meant to be. In the weeks and months that followed their move, the Wilcox family found themselves settling into a life that felt, for the first time in a long while, like their own. The shadows of Ryan's manipulations and the scars of betrayal had not disappeared entirely, but they had faded enough to allow light to filter through. Michael and Claire worked hard to rebuild their relationship. Therapy became a regular part of their routine, not just as a way to address past wounds, but to ensure they communicated better moving forward. For Claire, it was a chance to rediscover herself outside the confines of her mistakes. For Michael, it was a way to confront his lingering doubts and learn to trust again. Emma, with the resilience only a child could possess, became their anchor. Her laughter filled the house, her stories about school, and her newfound love of soccer, reminding Michael and Claire of the joys they still had to hold on to. She had weathered the storm of their turmoil with grace, and in many ways, she was a testament to the strength they were trying to emulate. One afternoon, as Michael was working in their small but sunny backyard, Claire joined him, holding 2 glasses of lemonade. She handed one to him and sat on the edge of a weathered bench, her gaze thoughtful. "I was thinking about the old house," she said, breaking the silence. Michael looked at her, surprised. "What about it?" Claire shrugged, a small smile tugging at her lips. "How it always felt like we were trying to live up to something, like we had to make it perfect because that's what everyone expected of us." Michael nodded, understanding what she meant. "This place feels different, doesn't it? Like it doesn't need to be anything but what we make of it." Claire reached for his hand, her fingers curling around his. "I think that's what I like about it the most. It feels like a home we've built together, not a house we're trying to fit into." Michael smiled, his chest tightening with a mix of gratitude and hope. For the first time in years, he felt like they were on solid ground. As the seasons changed, so did the Wilcox family. Michael and Claire found joy in the small moments: family dinners, lazy Sunday mornings, and impromptu dance parties in the kitchen. They learned to forgive each other and themselves for the mistakes of the past. It wasn't always easy, but they discovered that healing wasn't about perfection. It was about persistence. Michael also discovered a newfound sense of purpose in his work. His new job, though less prestigious than his previous one, gave him the balance he had always craved. He spent more time with Emma, coaching her soccer team and cheering her on at games. Being there for her felt like a second chance, a way to be the father he had always wanted to be. Claire's event planning business flourished in their new town. She took on projects that inspired her, channeling her creativity into making other people's dreams come to life. For Claire, it was more than just a job. It was a reminder that she was capable of building something meaningful, even after everything that had happened. The final chapter of their journey came on a warm spring evening as the family gathered on their back porch to celebrate Emma's 11th birthday. The yard was strung with fairy lights, and the table was piled high with Emma's favorite foods. Her laughter rang out as she opened presents and blew out the candles on her cake, her face glowing with happiness. As the evening wound down, Michael and Claire sat together, watching Emma chase fireflies in the fading light. "She's incredible," Claire said softly, her voice filled with awe. Michael nodded, his gaze never leaving their daughter. "She really is." Claire leaned her head on his shoulder, her expression contemplative. "Do you think we've done enough to make up for everything she's been through?" Michael wrapped an arm around her, pulling her closer. "I think we've done our best, and that's all we can do." Claire smiled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I think so too." In the quiet moments after Emma had gone to bed, Michael and Claire sat together on the porch, the night air cool and still around them. "Do you ever think about where we were a year ago?" Claire asked, her voice tinged with wonder. Michael nodded. "All the time, and I'm grateful every day that we made it here." Claire reached for his hand, her touch warm and steady. "Me too." As they sat there, bathed in the soft glow of the porch light, Michael felt a deep sense of peace. The road they had traveled had been long and difficult, but it had led them to a place where they could breathe, laugh, and hope again. And so, the Wilcox family found their new beginning. They weren't the same people they had been before the storm, but maybe that was the point. They had learned, grown, and rediscovered what truly mattered: each other. Their story wasn't about perfection or happily ever afters. It was about resilience, forgiveness, and the courage to keep going, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. It was a reminder that no matter how broken things might seem, there's always a way forward. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like this video, share it with someone who loves a tale of redemption, and subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories. Until next time, keep believing in the power of second chances. This concludes the story. Thank you for being part of it.